listening to the Kingdom Lum podcast from the LUM.
Today I want to talk about another document that you probably haven't heard of, and it's the recently published NATO document on psychological warfare. It's called Cognitive Warfare, or the Battle for Your Brain. And this is really relevant because it really fits in with all of these other white papers and documents that we've covered. Most people don't look at these kinds of things. They don't cover this kind of stuff, but we focus on that here because this really gives us an insight into how the world really works, how the system really works. And this document talks about the importance of managing threat perception in the sense of looking at other countries as supposed threats and reorganizing man's analysis of himself, changing images of man type ideas to view humans as platforms. Platforms are now humans, which is exactly what another one of these documents says, the transhumanist document from the UK Ministry of Defense that we're going to look at here in a moment. But this is a basic psychological warfare approach that sees the human as a kind of walking modem, basically. You're going to be an emitter and a receiver of the information that the system downloads into you, quite literally. And it's another element of what the Pentagon many years ago titled Full Spectrum Dominance. There's a great book by F. William Engdahl called Full Spectrum Dominance that outlines what that exactly means. And from the NATO perspective, they want to basically create a hybrid form of warfare against all forms of enemies, economic, cyber, information, and psychological warfare. That's part of this full spectrum dominance. It involves hacking the individual. So at a literal brain level, not just a mental thought level, but also in the sense of the cells, the gray matter itself being hacked, literally like Johnny Mnemonic or something like this. The vulnerabilities of the human brain will become more and more sophisticated and susceptible to this kind of social engineering. This also brings to mind old psychological warfare documents like The Mind Has No Firewall. If you've never read that, I recommend that we may do that as another one of these videos as well. In 2020, NATO sponsored a study on this new form of warfare, which they called cognitive warfare. And if you know about the integrity leaks, it's very similar to that, if you want to look that up. But the brain is the battlefield of the 21st century. The report stresses that humans are the contested domain, and the future conflicts that will likely occur amongst the people digitally first and then physically thereafter. So things go into this, the cyber sphere, and then it becomes a feedback loop that goes into the mind. And then ultimately, keep in mind, it's not just about your thought processes, but actually changing the brain chemistry itself. Remember what Klaus said, we will be in the body, we will enter into the body. So it will be my fingers inside of you, controlling you like the puppet of the controlling you like the puppet of the Jim Henson hand. I will be the Jim Henson hand inside of your head to control the mouth. Put your hand inside the puppet head.
Hello out there in Clown World. It's your host, Kingdom Lum, Small Town Underground, episode 6. And what you just heard was a small snippet from one of the latest videos by Jay Dyer. If you don't know who Jay Dyer is, I recommend him highly to you. A very, very smart man. He has a YouTube channel called Jay's Analysis. And he's also does the 4th hour, I think, at least one day a week, if not more, on Senor Jones's informational El Warzo that you can find out there. Not on YouTube, but you should know where to go. And I wanted to play that real quick because it's going to tie into everything that I'm talking about tonight. Basically, a recent NATO document that's been studied in 2020 about the evolution of smart technology and transhumanism, which is something I find quite fascinating, and I'm going to talk a lot about it because people just don't talk about it. And you have to understand that where the bigger picture is than what we see day to day. Also, I wanted to kind of mention a video game. I do enjoy video games, and I really thought that the Cyberpunk 2077 looked like a really cool game. You know, it was like sort of a Grand Theft Auto in the future on steroids. And the funny thing about my research for this next show, I actually found the game on like a Black Friday deal, and I know the game had like a horrible launch, and things are horrible with it on certain platforms, and especially on the older Xbox. I decided to give it a try, and I found it. It was half price, and I downloaded it, and I'm actually playing it when I can right now. But it's a very crude game, to say the least. But what's so funny to me is that I had listened to Jay Dyer a couple times on this snippet. It's called The Great Reset and Psychological Warfare, Cognitive Warfare. And sort of the things I'm going to lay out tonight, and along with what you heard, this game is pretty much step into step of what he's talking about. This NATO document is very eerie to me. Like when you go through this game, everything is ultra sexualized, and it's a very dark, futuristic world, very dystopian, and there are a lot of things that he's talking about in this document that he's reading that are actually verbatim in the game. It's pretty crazy that how, I don't know, coincidence? I don't know. Anyway, I just thought that was pretty wild, but I think that'll tie in as well. First off, before I dive in, we'll go and talk a little bit about some current events. I wanted to bring up the MAGA and QAnon Civil War. I'm not going to talk too much about this, but I've been keeping tabs on our friends Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell, and of course Patrick Byrne, and a few others. If you don't know the background, basically Kyle Rittenhouse went on Tucker Carlson and told everybody that Lynn Wood was a piece of crap and that he was just using him for money. And I'm just paraphrasing all this. So basically Lynn Wood, he got his feelings hurt real bad because some people weren't speaking up. And so from what I gather anyway, he really likes to tape record people. And so he ended up recording a phone call with Patrick Byrne, who threw Sidney Powell and Flynn and all these people under the bus. And then he released it. And then everything just started spinning out of control. But I find it, I'm actually fascinated by this whole thing. These are supposed to be the key players in our the movement to fix 2020, and it's just all fell apart. And I pulled up. I've been reading several different articles over the last week about it, but I just decided to just put in a normal search to see what would pop up, if the layman person just wasn't keeping up with it. And so basically the first articles were Daily Beast articles. The first one I pulled up here, the big MAGA and QAnon Civil War keeps getting nuttier and sleazier. And I'm not going to really read all of this, but we can go through a little bit of it. Wood has been scrambling to retain credibility on the right ever since Kenosha shooter Kyle Rittenhouse slammed him as a shoddy lawyer and accused him of betrayal and grift. And stopped the steal Sidney Powell, former Overstock CEO Patrick Byrne. And apparently, well, I've been keeping up with this because I've been watching the all this unfold on Telegram. I actually subscribed to all three of them just to see what was going on, because there's a lot of crazy stuff. Basically, Patrick Byrne threw Sidney Powell under the bus about her money dealings, and the fact that apparently she wanted to sleep with him and he snubbed her, so she got pissed. And then Wood he's just been releasing everything. And then they went on to release an audio of Flynn talking about that QAnon he thinks was just a CIA-backed plot. So the reason I want to bring this up is I don't want to dwell on it, but I want to make a little bit of a point. I mean, people have asked me, do I think Lynn Wood is crazy? Well, I think he's a little crazy. We're all a little crazy, but a couple of things to take away here. I'm not taking any sides on any of these people because it's just basically like it is a high school squabble, right? I mean, these cats are now I guess they hate each other now, and they're just throwing all of this dirt back and forth, and the media is just having a field day with it, right? And man, Lynn Wood posts like 80 or 90 times a day on some days, and that I think is wild. Like, what is he doing? Just sitting back and just like, I mean, post after post after post after post, and you look at the timestamps on it, I'm just like, man, this guy, what is he doing? So he's basically was pissed about Patrick Byrne, and then Patrick Byrne called him. But basically, I think Patrick Byrne was just trying to play cleanup about the whole thing, but he ended up spilling the beans on a lot of things that Powell was doing, and he's basically saying that she was using these election nonprofits to pad her income to take care of these huge lawsuits, from Dominion and everything. And the funny thing I think about Lynn Wood is that Lynn Wood basically removed himself, and I guess by proof too, that he really didn't have anything to do with all these people. He was just they were his house guests. So the point I'm bringing up about this is, so all these people were supposed to be knee deep in fixing our election and doing all this, and now there's reports coming out about, let's see, feds are asking questions. Feds asking questions about Sidney Powell and her pro-Trump group. So apparently she's in some hot water because beans were spilled about money that's not in the right place. And then you've got Lynn Wood saying, well, I never was a part of any of this anyway. So he's completely removed himself. And then you got Patrick Byrne, who's like stuck in the middle. And then, so were these people ever really working on the fixing election issues, or was this just a huge scam? Was this a big ploy to make money? You know what I'm saying? Like, so what were you doing, Lynn Wood, if you really weren't a part of any of this, because you're throwing the dirt out there, but you've also said, well, I didn't have anything to do with any of this. And I'm like, okay, well, I'm scratching my head thinking, well, what were you doing then, And so now people are not going to be participating at this event and that event, and we should check the money. It's always about the money, no matter what. I'm telling you, you always follow the money. And where there's a will, there's a dollar sign. You know what I'm saying? It's really, really crazy. So, and interesting about Michael Flynn, which, like I said, I'm not taking any sides here, but Michael Flynn just basically come out and said that Q was a bunch of nonsense, right? Which brings me to my next point. It really is nonsense, the whole Q, not the movement, okay? And I'm sure that people are going to mistake what I'm saying, but I say this for a reason, not to make people mad, but let me go back up just a little bit. People know about Q, but not everybody knows about 4chan. Not everybody knows about 8chan and all these other not really secret websites, but very anonymous websites. Okay, 4chan used to be a completely anonymous website that you could go on, and it was under the information never was really saved. You could go on there as anonymous and talk about whatever you want. I mean, and there was some pretty crazy stuff. They had all kinds of chat rooms that you could go into. And I believe, I didn't do a lot of research on it, that you could find some pretty crazy stuff on there. I think even like serial killers or child molesters would post things in certain chat groups, and nobody really knew who it was. And they ended up shutting down 4chan, and then they created 8chan for a little while, but I remember this back in the day years ago. In fact, I used to go on 4chan and look at everything and check it out. And there was all kinds of crazy, crazy stuff on there. It was kind of like weird stuff, like you can ask a she-male anything you want, that kind of stuff. It wasn't always that, but there was a politics forum, and there was a lot of people, a lot of truthers, and I consider myself a truther, but a lot of truthers that were out there that was passing information along and, sharing things and stuff that you could never really talk about, stuff that wasn't mainstream, when the word conspiracy used to really mean something. And all of this stuff started on 4chan and 8chan, okay? I think a lot of people got into the Q movement way later on during the Trump presidency when people... Okay, what the Q movement did was it brought a lot of people out of the woodwork and into the fold of, hey, things are not what they seem, right? But by the time that Q got huge, or at least when people started talking about it around me, I even I was kind of blown away. I was like, really? Kind of past Q here, and Q was a huge movement. I mean, it just swept America, and it swept a lot of people into this notion that the United States really was going to correct itself through Trump, And I can totally see why it swept people up, why it got people so interested. And where I had dropped off Q a long time before all this was my normal research into things. I was looking at Q and going down the rabbit holes with the posts and trying to connect the dots. But this is what got me with Q, was that a couple of years, I guess, before 2017 maybe, there was a whole bunch of sealed indictments that were supposed to come out with Q, and there were several, they named a few people and talked about these secret indictments in D.C. that were going to come out, and once these indictments were unsealed, there were several people going to go down, and that's the first time I believe I'd heard much of anything about sealed indictments. It was actually before I even got into this movement, this 2A movement. And it struck me as kind of odd because I was thinking, well, if they know about these sealed indictments, right? If they have these sealed indictments and they know about them, why can they not open these sealed indictments, right? And this went on for quite a while. I mean, we now it's common knowledge when you hear the term sealed indictment, right? But not a single sealed indictment ever came out, And that was years before Q got to the mainstream, but my other gripe with Q was before the 2020 election, I scratched my head because Q was just getting more and more predominant, bigger and bigger, yet the news media would never talk about Q, right? They only really started kind of talking about Q after November and January 6th, and I mean, they were talking about Russia collusion all the way up to the end. They were talking about the Steele dossier and all this stuff. I mean, they're still talking about this stuff, but they never focused on Q much. If you got to go back and put your memory cap on and just remember, you never heard much of anything about Q in the news or denouncing Q. Like, you would think that if you were somebody like Comey or Nancy Pelosi, that in something like Q was that real and that big and those kind of leaks that were going on, right? You would think that these people would jump head over heels trying to find out who it was and shut them down because they had damning evidence, correct? Same thing goes with during the Trump administration, right? Trump never had control of his own Department of Justice, right? Not at any point in time. We've seen this over and over again, and not one time did the Department of Justice or the CIA try to really debunk Q or go after Q. And that's some real damning evidence. There was good things that came out of the Q movement. There really are. There was a lot of networking, a lot of information that was shared. But where did it really go? What did we're here, it's November, almost a year after the elections, and what has Q done or provided for us, for anybody for that matter? I mean, Q is relatively non-existent now, and people are separating themselves from Q. And I can tell you, I got real uncomfortable a few times just mentioning that I didn't think Q was that real around some circles, just because people were so into this. And I know what it was. People wanted it to be real. We wanted it to be real. We wanted a savior from this clown world that we're living in, right? We really thought that there was some white hats and some generals, and that Trump was going to straighten everything out. And my whole point with the Q is that you have to, once there's different levels of becoming awakened, right? And I believe a Q is sort of a beginner's awakening. Like, that's really what it was for a lot of people. It's like, wow, Q, this is something I can get into, and somebody's already laying it out, and you can connect all these dots, and it's kind of easy. And then a lot of people were jumping on board, and I think there was a lot of genuine hope in that movement. I really do. But it's hard for somebody like myself that's been in this game for a long, long time, and Q was old news. And I'm gonna go. I'll tell you how far removed I was from Q in the first place. Was that there was a rally, a Marjorie Greene rally, that we went to in a neighboring county, and we were interviewed by a Washington Post reporter. And she kept bringing up Q because she was basically trying to paint the narrative that Marjorie Greene was a Q supporter and all these things. Whether she was or not had no bearing on what they were asking us, but they were asking us all these questions about Q, and it was completely about Q. And I got really confused, and I asked the lady, I was like, "Why do you keep bringing up Q? It has nothing to do with Q, you know." And she could not believe that at that time I was like, I'm not a Republican, I'm not a Democrat, I'm an independent. This woman had a hard time believing that it was just some independent guy out there who's supporting the 2A, and I don't subscribe to Q. And I had to think about that for a while, but you understand that the Q was a narrative that was being pushed on the 2A movement and the conservative movement to not only paint us far right, but crazy. This is a Q supporter. It's just like another word, like racist, that you can use as somebody. You look at them and say, "Oh, that's just a Q supporter." You understand what I'm saying? So I pretty much agree with little Mike Flynn here about it being a psyop, because it did a lot of damage. It did a lot of damage to the truth community. It did a lot of damage to the movement, and it made a lot of us just look really stupid. And then look what happened at the end of this thing, when we were literally I had people calling me, people coming out of the woodwork at work, friends that I had grown up with, that always kind of thought I was a little nutty, I guess, and because they kind of knew what I was into, and they were genuinely scared. Like, they were like, the power's going to go out, we're going to black out the emergency broadcast, Trump's going to take over, the generals. Well, and I had to tell them all as nice as I could. I was like, listen, just trust me. Make sure you got some food. Make sure you got some water. Just make sure you're okay. You got some batteries. Don't worry about any of this stuff, And I really had to bite my tongue, and because I was like, this is crazy. This is not going to happen. Q is not in control. And I kept my mouth shut a long time about this until quite recently, when these I'm just going off my head on this part, but the general that just came out, the one the Chinese love in general, and talking about how we should be more in line with China, and then they promoted the Navy, whatever, you know what I'm talking about, the thing. Okay, and then I just wanted to kind of look at everybody and say, okay, these are the generals that you were talking about that was going to take control of everything. Not to mention the fact that when you start talking about military tribunals, I don't give a crap who it is. When you're talking about military tribunals, I'm talking about, it's not emotionally, I'm all for it, but lawfully, that's a scary thing when we get to that point in our country. But you kind of get what I'm saying here, and that shouldn't really make anybody mad. It's a state of affairs. This is how powerful the psychological war is, and I really just wanted to highlight that. It doesn't mean that if you like Q or that you support Q or it doesn't mean that you're crazy. It doesn't mean anything. I'm not judging here. I looked at a lot of Q stuff, but as far as waiting on a savior, that's really not going to happen. So, I mean, I take it like I take everything else with a grain of salt, right? Because you have to. You cannot knee jerk on all of this information, and believe me, it's an information overload. But yeah, Q is a psychop, of course it was. But it's funny that people like Michael Flynn and Donald Trump, for that matter, everybody knew Q had amazing energy with it. Okay, forget what these idiots talk about. Q had amazing energy, and it was really, really energizing people and bringing people together, and it was great. But like I said, a lot of people, I think, took it way too literally. And as much as I would love to see these sealed indictments come out and all these people go down, it's just not going to happen. And now we're nearly a year after a Trump presidency, and we see what kind of clown we're living in. And where's Q? Where's the white hats? Where are you people at? And I always told my close people that were close to me, I said, they would ask me, well, do you believe this? Do you believe that? I said, I tell you what I believe. I said, I'll keep my fingers crossed, and if it happens, I'll be ready, right? That's all I would give them, because number one, I don't write anything off, and take everything as a grain of salt. You don't have to write anything off. But as far as believing it, like gospel-y, no, absolutely not. If the power was ever going to go out, I just wanted to make sure I was ready. I could feed my family, and I had batteries for flashlights, right? Because no matter what, let's say that stuff really was going to happen, well, then you were going to have to deal with it, right? You would be the one to deal with it. So my focus was always on, I don't really care if this is true or not. If it happens, I want to be ready for it. And so it didn't happen. And but, Mike Flynn made some money off of that, I'm sure. And that just goes back to my previous point here, is that follow the money. I believe that we did have a lot of people on our side that used the Q movement, knowing fair well that it was not real, and like it begs the question about why didn't anybody go after it? Why didn't prominent Democrat figures ever go after it when it was huge? It's because they wanted to make a mockery out of us, and they did in a lot of ways. So let's see. That another thing I wanted to say too, I'm going off some notes here, was that basically they're 10 steps ahead of us. You heard what I opened with, the CIA document about psychological warfare, right? They're 10 steps ahead of us, So the other thing that I wanted to cover about QAnon wasn't in vain. Because one thing that the QAnon movement did open up, and I believe I expressed this a little bit earlier, was that it did bring more people, it woke more people up, right? If there was ever a silver lining about the Q movement, is that it made things a lot easier to see, just like Donald Trump did. The Donald Trump presidency, I think the big takeaway is that because Trump was never in control, Trump never had anybody on his side, Trump never had any institution. No, everybody was working against him. He was a one-man show up there. That's why we could never get anything done, with the exception of the first 2 years of his presidency, when we had full control, Republican, conservatively. And these rhino Republicans, these conservatives across our entire nation, sat on their hands and did nothing. They did absolutely nothing. They could have pushed so many things through and taken care of so many things, yet they didn't, because they never liked Trump. Trump was way too much for their base, and they knew it was a game, and Trump didn't know it was a game. He really thought that he could come in here and he could change things, and that wasn't the case. It didn't happen that way. And so the takeaway from the Q movement is that, and Trump presidency, is that now everybody can see a lot more just how much you're being lied to, whether it's Q or CNN or anything else. I mean, you can see it. It's all around us, all right? I remember the first time that I could see it, because if you go back, I started listening to NPR radio when it was about 10 years old, and I was infatuated with the news, and I would always listen. But through the presidencies, I would always notice that if it was a Democratic president, okay, you would always have more stories, more news articles that were centered around America. And then if it was a Republican president, like when George Bush was in office, it always had to do with world politics, world politics. And then you'd go back to a Democrat president, it's always about changing America. And then when it was a Republican president, it was always about what was going on in the world. And now I understand what I was listening to was a slanted narrative, right? Because the Democrats wanted to change America. They want to erase America. They want to do away with our Constitution. And a Republican president, all they had to do was just focus on world affairs and all the crap that was going on, because we were always at war with somebody. So they didn't have to cover anything going on in America, because the conservatives were trying to keep America strong and the Democrats trying to change America. So that's when I first got to see it. I was about 17 or 18 years old. I started realizing that, especially that was really during the Clinton administration. Then you went to the Bush administration and then the Obama administration. But that was a crazy few years. So I'm moving along. I've got just more proof about how little control that we have, right? So I covered this last episode of this is from Garland Favorito, voter Georgia. Governor Brian Kemp's election audit report admits massive Fulton errors, first revealed by voter Georgia, right? And this was on the 27th of 2021. And I'm not going to read this. I read some of this before. They identified 36 instances of duplicate or misidentified batches in the Fulton audit. Most examples are part of 36 incorrectly reported batches. Duplicates, 60% batch error revealed. I've already covered these things. Even the episodes that were taken down, you can go on Rumble and check them out if you want to. But my point to all this is, and I'm telling you, I've always said, I'm just telling the truth here. It doesn't mean that you should give up. I'm not giving up. I'm going to keep going and just keep doing what I can do. But this is not going to change anything in Georgia, right? And we just found out I believe yesterday, I read the first article that said Stacey Abrams is running for governor of Georgia again, right? But none of this is going to change anything. So you can send all the letters they want to. Now, there are some lawsuits. Voter Georgia is doing a wonderful job. And it's funny to me because Voter Georgia, they're the real deal. They're not the Lynn Woods, Sidney Powell's, Flynn's and all this stuff. Those people are all good people in my eyes, and I hate to see the squabble, but it really makes you wonder what they're doing with millions and millions of dollars. Because I'm going to tell you something right now. If I had $500,000, the things that I would set up for my community alone would just would blow your mind. So if there's anybody out there listening and they want to give me $500,000, I can promise you I'll show you where every cent of that money went. It will all go to good Second Amendment type stuff, learning. But that's what I'm saying. Where did the money go? So all these monies in different accounts and squabbling, and so somebody got their feelings hurt, so they turn everybody in. Oh, I'm going to video or record you. There is no trust anymore, and I can't stand somebody that you can't trust. And I'll tell you now, that's not the way I operate. If I talk to people and we talk about things, that's where the buck stops there. It's nobody else's business. And it's one reason why I've been so successful in things that I've done is because I don't talk about those things, because no matter what, and maybe it's part of my makeup or something, maybe sometimes I should, but I don't know. If you can't trust a person and you can't talk to a person, it's the same thing with freedom of speech. If I can't talk to a person the way what I really want to say to them, then they're not worth being in my life, And it's just funny to me. I'm not throwing these people under the bus, but this is the people you're dealing with, right? The people that we're supposed to entrust and we're supposed to listen to, and we're supposed to read everything and know that they're on our side, and then there's all of this crap coming out on top of what we already have to deal with, the little people, us down on the ground, the paycheck to paycheckers who have to vote on this equipment and have to worry about this stuff. And so it's like, really, what are you people doing? So I'm going to move along here. There's some more information, and this is also about the money, right? Democrat group founded to fight disinformation. Okay, the Democrat group that were founded to fight disinformation paid nearly $1 million towards the discredited Steele dossier researchers, right? That was from Fox News. A nonprofit heavily backed by liberal donors was set up to combat disinformation, but the documents reveal, the tax documents, that the group paid hundreds of thousands of dollars in 2020 to the researchers who created the discredited Steele dossier, right? The Democracy Integrity Project paid over $521,000 to Christopher Steele and $405,000 to Fusion GPS, right? To protect. So they actually paid nearly $1 million for that stupid fake dossier, and to this day you can't get through to some of these idiots' minds that the Steele dossier was completely fabricated. It wasn't even real. They don't care. And I think that just blows my mind. You always follow the money, right? You've got all of this money that people are asking out of my pocket to help fight against election fraud. And then you have, by the way, this group is a George Soros-backed group. If you don't know who George Soros is, then there's no hope for you. And this is a Soros-backed group paying nearly $1 million to actually help the Steele dossier researchers, right? And that's mainstream news. That's what's in the news. That's what you heard every day. You didn't hear about anything else, and you can't talk about any of these things, right? I can't talk about the things I'd like to. I've already got community struck over it, and you can't highlight, all this stuff. But yet, groups can get away with paying nearly $1 million to something fake like that, right? So it's always about the money. So by the way, I wish voter Georgia all the luck in the world. You have my support 100%. Even if it doesn't make a difference, I thank you so much for all the work that you're doing, because that's more work than we got out of Sidney Powell or Lynn Wood or Patrick Burns or any of these other yahoos, or Mike Flynn for that matter, because I see a lot of talking heads, but there's boots on the ground that are really, really, really trying to do this stuff, and they're doing it because they care. They're not doing it for the money. So, lead me to my next current event. Ghislaine, whatever her name is, Maxwell, right? We don't even know what her real name is, man. I've listened to so much crap out there, and don't even know if it's Ghislaine or Ghislaine or whatever, or Ghislaine, God have mercy. You can't get the story right for nothing, but I just thought this was an interesting snippet that the lead prosecutor in the Ghislaine Maxwell case is Maureen Comey, which is the daughter of James Comey. So that's the lead prosecutor, James Comey's daughter. I mean, you can't make this stuff up. You can't make it up. That's insane. That's insane. I was looking up a lot of stuff on Ghislaine and trying to bring... Just basically scrolling through the Googles and the Braves, trying to see what pops up, and a lot of the articles about the case. I think we're in the third day, maybe fourth day of the trial. Not much out there, It's the start of the trial, and it's the main stuff we already know about the books and everything. But there's so much crap that needs to be brought to life, right? And so let's just talk about the idiocracy here of Kyle Rittenhouse, for example, right? So the Rittenhouse trial was videotaped, and we learned through the trial that the FBI had actually a flying drone out there that night that was able to capture some of this stuff, right? Now, the FBI wasn't going to intervene, right? We couldn't call in the National Guard. The police couldn't do anything, but the FBI had drones out in Kenosha watching this stuff, which the defense did not have the proper they didn't have the proper video. The prosecution basically stuck them on that. But I find it fascinating that the FBI were flying drones in Kenosha while the city was burning down, yet they couldn't intervene. And then we had a guy on trial who was a white supremacist that had absolutely nothing to do with race, right? And so what do you think we're going to get out of this Maxwell case, right? Because if you're not a fan of Steven Crowder, I'm a big fan of Crowder, and I watch Louder Crowder every day. And he's also got a YouTube channel called Crowder Bits, and they go through a sort of a small list of corporations that are involved, including like Universal, Disney, other things like that, stuff that would probably blow your mind that they can actually probably tie this case to. And you're not going to hear about any of that stuff. I mean, hell, Disney owns half the world right now, so if they can shut it up, they're going to shut it up. But it's just so funny to me that the Rittenhouse case was all about white supremacy and racism and everything else under the sun besides what it was really about, self-defense. Yeah, we're not going to get much of anything out of probably the biggest pedophile case, probably the biggest case of our lifetime, which is Epstein and Maxwell, right? So it just kind of shows you what kind of world we're living in. When I bring up these things, I do it for a reason, because I'm trying to expand your mind out of our world here, right? Like I've always said before, I look on my news feeds and I watch these videos and all this crazy stuff's happening. I walk outside, the birds are just chirping away, right? Where I live, it's like a dream world compared to what's going on in the world. But that's my whole point to all this, is that we have to transcend what we're seeing and get to the real meat and potatoes, right? Because all this stuff is just chicken fodder, right? And it's all just a distraction. Maxwell, Epstein, all this stuff. I mean, it's common knowledge that the Epstein case could have been blown wide open nearly 3 years ago by a reporter who was told to drop the entire case. She had enough, and this woman, she was going to get famous. I mean, that was her goal. She had the goods on this guy, and her number one motivation was, hey, I'm going to get famous off this. They dropped it. They buried that story, not to mention the fact that we've known about Lolita Express for 13 years. Thank you, Senor Jones. But, I hope I'm wrong, right? Like, I'm not sitting here telling you this is the way it's going to be. I certainly hope that we have people out there that are really, really paying attention to this trial, because myself, being a working man and a family man, I can't stay glued to my television. I have to make special arrangements just to be able to come in here and record this. So I can't keep up with this like I should. But I know one thing. At any point in time, I can open up my browser and find out exactly what was going on with Mr. Rittenhouse. And I can't even find anything that's really relevant right now that pops up on a search for Ghislaine Maxwell. That's mind-blowing. Blows my mind, right? So I'm gonna move on to my last two things this evening, and got this big Christmas box, and I've got this wrapping paper, and so I'm trying to wrap it all up here, right? But so I'm talking about all this other stuff, right? Well, let's move on a little bit. Let's get out of your head a little. Let's get out in the little. Put on your tinfoil hats here, okay? Because I'm about to cover a couple things from Gizmodo. And from several other sources too. Tiny living robots figured out how to reproduce. All right. Xenobots can reproduce via kinematic replication, which has never been observed before in organisms, right? So let's read a little bit of this story. Researchers have developed what they say are the world's first living robots now report they can reproduce in an unprecedented way, according to a peer-reviewed study published in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences on Monday. The robots in question they're not little constructions of silicon and metal. Instead, they're biological machines called Xenobots that the University of Vermont and Tufts University first described last year. They're genetically unmodified, cultivated stem cell bundles of the African clawed frog, Xenopus laevis, I guess. Let's see here. They're referred as a novel living machines. Now, what else do we use the word novel in? Novel, it's a novel virus. Novel virus. What is that? Coof? A novel living machines that are a new class of artifact, a living programmable organism. A living programmable organism. They are programmable in the sense that their rudimentary behaviors are mostly predetermined by their initial shapes. Okay. using an evolutionary algorithm, right? Now, where do we hear the word algorithms? They use algorithms in Facebook and YouTube and Google and all these things. So algorithms gotten quite popular over the years. I bet you never heard about algorithm when you were going to school, okay? Using an evolutionary algorithm, researchers devised thousands of possible designs for their novel life form, with the capacity for unidirectional locomotion being a fundamental physical requirement. Am I losing you yet? Okay, specialized cells were then grown and meticulously assembled to match the form designed by the computer. The Xenobots are capable of living for days to weeks in an aquatic environment using the energy stored in their cells. Okay. Anyway, I'm going to stop reading there, but basically, these Xenobots, which are made from stem cells, they're living robots, but the small of it is that they couldn't live very long. Okay, and you can read the article. I posted a picture of it. You can come and look at it for yourself. But they couldn't figure out how to keep them living. But then they figured out how to make them replicate. So basically, when one of the Xenobots is dying, it can actually kind of give birth to another Xenobot and just keep replicating. So there you've heard the words novel, algorithm, and replicating all in the same when you're talking about nanobots, or what maybe even smaller than nanobots, Xenobots. And this is real, okay? This is not something that I'm just pulling out of my big brown bag. This is real, okay? So Xenobots, they figured out how to reproduce, right? So that brings me to my next point, and then I'll kind of wrap it up here. But futurists predict how we'll one day eat, vacation, and work. From the New York Post. This caught my eye. This is on the 29th. Forget about Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, and all the talk about metaverse. The real future will be a world that is convenient and scary and fantastical, according to futurologists, right? So in this article, it talks about facial recognition is already common for phones, but in 30 years, it's quite possible that you will not use a key or even a credit card. You'll use your face or iris to make purchases and open locks, right? Recognition will be that good. Now, that's true, and that was a quote by Martin Ford, author of The Rules of Robots, How Artificial Intelligence Will Transform Everything, right? So what do you think about that? You think about the movie Minority Report. You think about facial recognition, right? All these dumb apps that we use. My phone's pulled up right now. It can see my face. It can recognize my face. We got thumbprints. We got all this great technology. Every time you use a Snapchat filter, if you don't already know that these kind of apps were made by acronym institutions to better technology, right? To improve technology. And you thought you were just putting some sparkles under your eyes, but you're actually helping the algorithms and the machines become smarter. So yeah, that's in there. And let's see, it says swapping out, the solution could be swapping out your eyes, implanting them with bionic peepers that provide updated, impenetrable information, open your house door, or buy a bagel at the local deli. So, and they're talking about this by the late 2040s, right? Well, it's 2021. It's fixing to be 2022. And so they're talking about by 2040, retinas will not only be as good as biological eyes, but will come souped with add-ons such as built-in camera, zooming capabilities, and special night vision adapters, right? Forget about cash, right? I mean, cash, I'm not even going to cover that. It'll be digital currency. They do think that coins and cryptocurrency-related items will come implanted with inflexible contracts. So you can read about that. So don't even worry about having dollars. It'll be digital currency. The projection is that we will need 3 million more artificial intelligence engineers by 2030. Okay. Now this was a quote by Thomas Frey, founder and executive director of Da Vinci Institute, right? A futuristic think tank in Colorado. So it's a think tank. It's telling you that by 2030, in another 8 years, they're going to need at least 3 million more artificial intelligence engineers. So this is moving quite rapidly, right? We'll need people to be drone command center operators who will fly surveillance drones, play a role in stopping crime by providing eyes everywhere, responding to gunshots from sensitive receivers, and following criminals until police on the ground can cuff them. There will be people hired to sort through real-time data to figure out which playgrounds have the fewest mosquitoes at any given time. So they're going to know all these things. Let's see. Careers. There will be all kinds of jobs that seem incomprehensible right now. Asteroid mining will take place. We have an asteroid belt in our solar system, and rocket pilots will find asteroids that have certain rare earth minerals. And maybe this popped up because I was searching asteroids. Like, that's funny to me. I just thought of that. I got this probably the day after I think maybe I finished my last episode, which was titled Asteroids, right? And so all of a sudden I get this pop up on my phone in my feed, and I'm like reading it, and I'm like, wow, this is the bigger picture. And but they do talk about mining asteroids. So food will be different in the future. You can read up about the food, and they'll have perfect water. It may have more potassium, vitamin C, oxygen. Robot kitchens. We already have lab-grown burgers that come from stem cells. Most of your meat will be grown in a lab. In case you happen to bring an antsy baby, there will be lab-grown breast milk. That's coming. We'll be able to hyperloop. We'll zip humans through vacuum tunnels at 750 miles an hour. Hyperspeed jets. You can make it from New York to L.A. in a couple hours. Some of this stuff doesn't sound too bad, does it? Hotels will not be where you think. You may be able to, let's see, rocket races. They're talking about hotels on other planets. Vacations that could take place in the center of the earth. Let's see. Already there are plans to revive the woolly mammoth, right? Because they're talking about zoos. Genetic engineering will allow for something close to the saber-toothed tiger, another species that we've never seen. So they're going to bring the woolly mammoth back. And such technology can't come quickly enough. They predict the majority of primate species may vanish in the next 25 to 50 years. Let's see. According to a future timeline, by 2053, wealthy humans will be able to purchase babies of their dreams, right? So you can basically order your baby, and you can figure out how you want it to look and the DNA. I mean, and you think I'm making this up, but I'm posting where you can see this, so you can look at it. Have anybody seen George Orwell's 1984? The fake wombs and perfect children could be used in rather worrying, like baby farms, because they're talking about women don't even have to go through pregnancy. They can just farm the baby. Let's see, customizable medicines. It says artificial intelligence will all contribute to serious life extensions, right? And I'm trying to find this one thing on here. Let's see. Yeah, listen to this one. By the 2040s, for example, it is predicted that bowel cancer survival rates will routinely hit 5 years, and those with cystic fibrosis will live to 70 as opposed to around 45 now. That allows you to keep living until the next thing happens. This Ray Kurzweil, right, takes 150 pills a day to aid with life extension. He believes that longevity escape velocity should be generally accessible within 10 years. So, and then it goes on to talk about deep fakes, right? Video deep fakes, which are already here. I thought that was interesting. The guy was talking about taking 150 pills a day every day. That's what he takes now. I'd be very interested to see what kind of pills he's taking. And then you talks about the deep fakes, right? Which I don't know if anybody out there, y'all not seen or seen the Tom Cruise deep fakes, excuse me. They're pretty impressive to say the least. So God only knows what's going to happen there. It's going to be kind of crazy. But anyway, so here's the bow on the wrapping present. I started with the Jay Dyer about psychological warfare. I went into the Q movement and all these things going on around the Kyle Rittenhouse, Ghislaine Maxwell, all this stuff. I'm trying to paint you a picture, all right? Especially for the people out there that have just awakened, whatever you want to call it, red pill, blah 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 blah. The thing about it is that you really have to understand that this goes. When I say they're 10 steps ahead of us, all right, the little things that we're dealing with right now, they're not even like included into the future, right? When you've got this much technology and we are plugged in this much, I mean, literally the Facebook, which is going to metaverse. And if you don't know what metaverse is, you need to look it up, right? You've heard of Oculus Rift and all these. They're literally going to plug us into these imaginary worlds, just like the Matrix. I mean, you can say it's crazy all you want, and because you don't understand, right, that this stuff is real. These tiny living robots that can reproduce, these Xenobots, are real. This is what people are working on. Now, while we're sitting here and we're worried about our gun rights and we're worried about voter fraud and all these things that we really have no control over, and I don't even think that anybody has control over it. The future is moving into a transhumanistic future, plain and simple. It's always been the case, and they will be able to do what they want with us because we are commodities, okay? They will have to depopulate this planet. They will have to get rid of a lot of us. And then they'll have to implement technological advances that they can control us with. They can take away what they deem as bad away from you and me and our children. And whereas I'm one of the few, not few, but in my circles, we always joke, computers weren't around really until I was about in the 4th, 5th grade, right? I mean, cell phones, not till I was out of high school, basically. I grew up pre-internet, pre-Google, pre-all this stuff. I know what life was like before the advent of a telephone in my pocket, before being tethered to all this crap. My kids do not, and I work with people that do not know, and they will never know because this is the way that life is. It's the same difference as I never knew what it was like without air conditioning in the home, right? But my parents knew that quite well. I never knew what it was like without a McDonald's down the street, but my parents did. So it's the evolution of life. But while we're worried about all these things going on, you must understand that there's so much more. That when you continue to dive in, you got to take a step back from the politics and everything and realize that there are companies and think tanks out there that are progressing us in ways that we can't even understand right now. And I just shared with you a couple of ways, right? And while I'm living, that doesn't make me want to fight any less or, change what I'm doing right now, because I'm not going to give up on the Second Amendment. I'm not going to give up on my constituents and my communities. But, it's always, I tell you what, it's just like the serenity prayer. God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Well, I hope that you're going to take away a little bit of wisdom of the difference, that no matter what, this is what is coming. This is what is. This is the natural evolution. And I don't think there will be near as many people to see this as there are now, because I honestly believe that the elitists and the global cabals are already preparing themselves while we're down here working for a living. These people have been able to buy underground bunkers, and they've been able to do all kinds of crazy stuff to protect themselves. And in the end, I don't think this plan even will concern us. But who knows? But if you don't believe that any of this stuff's real, all you got to do is look it up. And the funny thing about it is it's crazy that I can look this up, because this stuff I've known about for years and years and years, and it's now mainstream. So, I guess somebody knocked the tinfoil hat off, and it just became completely mainstream. I mean, this is mainstream that you can read this now. Living robots, and you've heard the words that the articles use, right? Which is the same words they use in Omicron, COOF, blah blah blah, algorithms, everything we use. So we're much more hooked into this than one wants to admit. But I hope you're learning something anyway. I'm having a blast doing this, and I'm getting a little more comfortable. So I'm going to leave you with this, because I said all that to basically say this, that I'm fixing to play for you now from Prager University. And if you're not a member of Prager, you really should be. But this is where I'm going to end, and I appreciate it. I look forward to the next episode, and be safe out there.
I have said this. People, as long as I remember speaking, I have said this. People say that evil is dark, but that's not true. Evil is actually very bright. You can look at the dark, but you can't look at the very bright. Very few people stare at evil. They deny it. There's a very famous book called The Denial of Death, wherein Ernest Becker, who wrote the book, speaks about the human desire to really deny that they'll die. But the truth is, everybody knows they'll die. What people really deny is evil. Because if you acknowledge evil, you have to fight it. And people are not brave. That's the human condition. And they don't want to fight it. They want to deny that it's really that bad. So I have seen this all of my life, especially with outside of Nazism, the great 20th century evil of communism. 100 million people, approximately, were killed by communist regimes, not in war. I'm not talking about deaths of soldiers. I'm talking about just innocent people, tortured, starved, burned, shot to death. That's the record. See, that's an example, though, of people in a sort of denial. You should be shocked and horrified at what I just said. 100 million people in one century? But it doesn't. Stalin, the Soviet tyrant, who, by the way, made North Korea possible, tragically. Stalin is truly evil. Anyway, Stalin, who killed about 20 to 40 million people of his own nation, Soviet Union, a combination of Russia and other countries that the Russian Empire owned, he said, it's a very famous statement, actually, one death is a tragedy, 1 million is a statistic. That's the state of people's understanding of evil. So when I said 100 million, people don't fall down and go, "Oh my God!" It's too grandiose to even imagine. And remember, for every one of the 100 million, think of the ripple effect on family and friends and community. So we're talking about 1 billion people of staggering suffering that communism caused. And yet, when I grew up, anti-communism had a bad name. Yeah. Oh, he's an anti-communist zealot. What's wrong with that? I hope you were an anti-Nazi zealot. Why aren't you an anti-communist zealot?
And you heard it there. So I'm fixing to sign off, and I want to leave you with one more thing. I'm going to be posting this on every episode. If you don't or haven't already heard or signed up for Reset Wars, I'm going to post this picture here, and you need to look up resetwars.com. I think it's going to be some pretty good information coming out in the near future, and we need to do all we can to continue to gain knowledge and understand that this is much bigger than what we're seeing on these computer screens. Like the things that are going on behind the scenes are much, much bigger, right? And I hope that I've been able to paint a bigger picture for you and give you a little bit more open your mind up a little bit to the things that are really going on, right? And the conditioning that we're going through and the technology shift that we're going through. So, but yeah, we need to support resetwars.com. Look it up, and you guys have a good evening.